So I've come a really long way in bodybuilding, starting off with 125 pounds of me to realize my goal of being a successful natural bodybuilding champion. And there are a lot of things that I did wrong. And in this video, I'm going to help you make sure you don't make those mistakes. And if I could do it all over again from the very first day of walking into the gym, here's what I would do. Number one, starting off, I'd never train more than 10 to 15 minutes. Number two, I would never train more than 3 days a week. Number three, my protein intake would only be about 0.6 grams of protein per pound of body weight and no more. So, like I said, that sounds radically different from conventional training ideologies. But here's the deal. I was able to put all this muscle mass on, going from where I started at 125 pounds to where I am today, training 3 times a week with a system called naturally intense, high intensity training, whereby I train for 10, 15, max 20 minutes. Now, bear in mind, a lot of what I have to say is going to sound extremely controversial, but bear in mind that the only reason why it sounds controversial is the fact that most of the information that you get doesn't come from natural bodybuilders. It comes from people who are using steroids. The majority of fitness influencers, they use drugs and then they turn around and tell you exactly what you should be doing and how you should be doing it. And so I'm here with 3 decades plus of natural bodybuilding knowledge that's not only going to help you get better results, but it's also going to help you spend less time in the gym, get less injuries, and most importantly, help you save some money as well. And the first aspect is how short the workouts are, 10 to maximum 50 minutes. And you may ask yourself, how is it possible to get these kinds of results training with such a short period of time? And the answer is intensity. Our workouts are blisteringly intense. And when we train almost always to momentary muscular failure. But not all the time, in that every single workout within the context of naturally intense, high-intensity training is always different. And so not only the exercise is always different, but the manner of execution is also different as well, as we used every single possible high-intensity training technique to make the workouts as intense as possible. Now, 10-15 minutes, how is it so short? One of the things that makes this form of training stand out from other forms of high-intensity training is the fact that there is 0 rest between sets. That's right, 0 rest. As the focus is to create so much intensity and unaccustomed stimulus that every single time you train with every single exercise, your muscles are completely unprepared for it, which in turn stimulates the adaptive response. Now, when I first started training, like everybody else, my workouts lasted an hour and a half. And the results were okay, but they weren't exactly stellar. And I couldn't really see that if I had kept on going the way I was going, that I was going to realize my goal of being a successful natural bodybuilder. I was putting some muscle on. I'd probably get to a place where I'd look good at the beach, but that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to go all out. I wanted to look like a comic book character, and I was going to do it without using drugs. And one of the first things that was so important for me was focusing on intensity. And bear in mind, while a 10-minute workout does sound fantastic, that was never really my goal. This is something that I actually stumbled across because when I started training with full out intensity, 0 rest between sets, concentrating exercises, it was physically impossible for me to be able to keep on training at that level of intensity for more than 10, maximum 15 minutes. These days, after 30 plus years of doing it, I can train for about 20 minutes. And that's with me really pushing it. It represents the upper end of my training duration, as my average workout is somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes. Now, you might say 10 minutes, that's just too short. If I train all out, I could probably train for at least 40 minutes for an hour, and that's simply not possible. You may think you're training all out, but you're not, because it's simple physics. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, which means there's a finite amount of energy that every single one of us has, no matter how elite of an athlete we may be. And over the years, I've trained the best of the best, from Olympic athletes, US Navy SEALs, triathletes, and some truly hardcore mixed martial arts fighters. And none of them were able to last more than 10 minutes. Now, I remember when I first started training this way, how difficult it was to walk into the gym and walk right back out 10 minutes later, and everybody around wondering, what did you just do? And also thinking to yourself, but you're not doing enough. But the reason I kept on doing it was the result. Results have kept on coming, and because my training volume was so low and I was constantly changing exercises, I never had any overuse injuries, and I'm able, thankfully, in my 50s to be lifting the weights I was lifting in my 20s. The next important aspect and big mistake I made when I first started training was training 6 days a week and not training 3 days a week. I've trained 3 times a week for the past 30 plus years, and you really can't argue with the results. Here's the thing. Muscles get bigger and stronger due to unaccustomed stimulus, like I said before, Broken record, I know, but I'm going to keep on saying it over and over because it's really important. But equally important is the fact that muscles only get bigger and stronger in an adaptive process while they are at rest. That's right. Your muscles do not get bigger and stronger while you're working out. When you work out, if you achieve overload with an unaccustomed stimulus, there will be an adaptive response, but that adaptive response happens while you are resting. And so it makes perfect sense over the course of a week that you're training 3 days all out, but you're resting 4 days, resting more than you are training. Now, this contradicts a lot of conventional training ideas out there, which again is put forward by people on drugs. Because if you're using drugs, you're going to recover faster from your workouts, which means it makes sense because you're enhanced to train more often and also train longer. And again, since many of the fitness influencers out there are using steroids, people see what they're doing, the high volume, the high frequencies, and figure if I do what they do, I'll get the same results. And you won't because you're natural. Natural athletes need that time between the workouts to fully recover and get the most out of their workout. It took me a couple of years to realize that the conventional high volume approach isn't necessarily the best way to increase muscle mass. See, here's the deal. Progressive resistance. It's the most conventional and most popular way to build muscle. For example, if you're doing a bench press, the idea is to always keep on doing bench presses every time you train your chest muscles and try and increase the weight you're using and the number of repetitions that you're able to do. Now, since muscle growth and strength increases are an adaptive response to an unaccustomed stimulus that brings about overload, if you're consistently adding weight, in theory, like I said, you should be seeing an increase in overall muscle mass over time and muscle strength. And like everyone else, when I first started training, that's exactly how I trained. But like almost everyone else, I didn't see much in the way of results. Yes, I did everything that I could to try and keep my weights going up, but in a relatively short time, I got to a plateau where my weights weren't going anywhere. Now, some natural athletes out there have fantastic results from progressive overload, but they tend to be in the minority and they tend to be the individuals who happen to be strong to begin with. If you're someone who walks to the gym and naturally can lift a lot more weight than everybody else can, your initial gains in terms of strength from applying progressive resistance is going to put you in a place where you're lifting heavy enough weights that's going to create a very impressive physique. And of course, if you're using drugs, that strength plateau that happens pretty quickly with natural athletes will not happen for you because the drugs you're using are going to help you lift far more weight than you would be able to lift had you stayed natural. And so for someone who does not have fantastic strength genetics and who's not using drugs, someone like me who literally started out struggling to bench press a 45-pound bar, the strength gains that come from progressive resistance isn't going to put you in a place where you have muscles like an elite natural bodybuilder. And so it makes far more sense to abandon that approach, especially if you already got into a place where you're plateaued, and focus instead, like I did, on intensity and variety. I know so many of you out there who had a similar experience, doing everything you could to get your weights up, but always get into that place where you get to a plateau, whereas no matter how hard you try, you can't put any more weight in the bar. And very often, you start feeling some pain in your joints to keep on training because you're doing the same exercises over and over. Now, uncomfortable reality. Overuse injuries are caused by doing the same motions over and over. And one of the biggest flaws of progressive resistance, aside from the fact that eventually you're going to inevitably plateau and get to a place where you can't put any more weight on, is the fact that it significantly increases the risk of overuse injury, which also puts too much stress on your joints and makes it very unlikely that you're going to be 50 years old and using the same weights that you're using in your 20s. And so yes, initially the weights you're using will be a lot less, but here's the strange thing. Whereby progressive resistance, the whole focus is trying to make the weights heavier and heavier and heavier to put on more muscle mass. With this particular form of high intensity training, it happens organically. And you can clearly see, I don't exactly train with light weights because over time, because you're consistently putting your muscles in a place where they're adapting, you will always get stronger. And most importantly, you're not spending hours in the gym and you're not subjecting your joints to as much stress. I was able to consistently keep on getting bigger and stronger as the years went by. So it's something I strongly recommend you look into, as it'll help you get better results in less time. Which is the other very important point that I would not do if I could start training all over again today, which is I would not focus at all on trying to get 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight or rely on an extremely high protein intake to increase muscle mass. Growing up in Trinidad, when I started bodybuilding, we didn't have that much money, and so I was only able to consume 120 grams of protein per day on average. And I might sound like a broken record talking about how I meticulously made notes of every single thing I ever ate and ever did, but it's a good thing I did so because we have those numbers to look at. As I went from 125 pounds to 198.5 pounds in competition shape. That's right. But I always thought I was missing out because, again, in the magazines, as a way to sell protein powders, they always talked about how important it was to have a ridiculously high protein intake because that's what's going to make your muscles bigger and stronger, which actually does work if you're using steroids. Those are the ones in the magazines talking about how much protein you should be eating. And so the first thing I did when I came to the US was to make sure I had 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight every single day, at least. And what I found looking back at 4 years worth of notes of eating 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight was that there was not really much of a difference in my overall muscle mass increase over time. That's right. Eating that much protein compared to eating 120 grams of protein per day on average made no appreciable difference how much muscle mass I was able to put on. What I did record was consistent stomach upset. And when I dropped my protein levels back down, the gains kept on coming. And one of the best things about not having to eat a tremendous amount of protein is the fact you don't have to spend your entire day trying to schedule those meals. You don't need to spend a lot of money on shady protein supplements, and you don't have to spend as much money on food. Now, people will often ask for optimal growth training with high-intensity training as a natural bodybuilder. Is it 0.6 grams of animal protein per pound of body weight, or does any form of protein work? And the answer is any form of protein. And so I've always tried to live my life with the principle that to whom much is given, much is expected. And I hope that what you learn in this video can help you avoid some of the very common training mistakes and help you on your path to excellence. And very important, because you've seen this video, make sure you watch this video on high-intensity training for natural athletes to learn even more about naturally intense high-intensity training and how it can help you get better results in less time. Thank you so much for tuning in. Know that I believe in you, and as always, Excelsior.